This all started because of a Ouija board.
What started because of a Ouija board?
Enfield.
I heard no such thing.
Are you serious?
That was in the movie.
No. They interviewed Janet, and Janet confirmed.
From what I had gathered, they didn't mention a Ouija board, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was a Ouija board involved.
Okay, so the point is, though, 2 weeks ago we told you not to mess with Ouija boards. Today, we're going to tell you why.
Warning. The topics discussed on this podcast are subject to adult themes and languages. We seek to unravel the unexplained and unknown. This is Encounters.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Encounters. My name's Dakota.
I'm Amanda.
And today, we are going to give you, what is it? It's like, in Harry Potter, it's the history of magic. We're going to give you some history of the occult.
What?
This is going to be an episode dedicated to Ed and Lorraine Warren, and we are giving you a sneak peek into one of their case files known as...
Enfield.
Yeah, the Enfield Poltergeist
Poltergeist,
case.
which we haven't even covered, but I think we gave you a little taste on what Poltergeist are, but they're really crazy.
Yeah. So, to get things started, we're going to introduce you to two paranormal investigators that are kind of synonymous with paranormal haunting movies. Wouldn't you say, Amanda?
Yes.
Currently, we've got the Conjuring
Oh my
universe, which is everything from Annabelle to Conjuring 1, Conjuring 2, covering the Perron family.
The Nun.
Conjuring 2, they start
With Amityville.
Which
I thought was hilarious.
So many different case files covered in recent movies, but we've also got, the entire Amityville line, even though...
The Warrens were barely in
at all.
They actually showed up after everything happened.
Let's roll back the clock here. Ed and Lorraine Warren were very popular paranormal investigators, and in our world of paranormal investigation and discovery and fascination, they are very big names. It's like the Tammy Faye Baker and Billy Graham of the occult.
That's true. Amen. Creepy. I can remember learning about the Warrens when I first started this journey. You learn about the Warrens, John Zaffis sometimes. He's done a case with the Warrens. There's just these figures. The Warrens are them. They really kind of took off.
For me, the first introduction I ever had to them was Amityville when I was a kid, and being overly obsessed with that.
For me, it was The Haunting in Connecticut.
Yes, another great
I cannot wait to talk about
story.
Yeah, it's crazy. I cannot wait to dive into that.
When we step back and really look at your idols and find out where they came from, what their history is. They're both from Connecticut, born and raised. From a very early age, Ed said that he could hear footsteps and see orbs, which he would develop into calling ghost globules. We call them orbs still, but Ed
Ghost
was very determined.
I can't even say it.
And Lorraine grew up in a very Catholic household. She was actually at an all-private school for girls when she met Ed. There was a really interesting story she shared in an interview on a YouTube channel that I watched today, where Lorraine was recalling her first memories of Ed. The interview said that Lorraine was convinced to going to this movie with a whole bunch of girls from school, and Lorraine was like, well, I don't really want to go, but okay, whatever, yeah, I'll go. And they asked her parents, and her parents said yes, and then when they left, the girls were like, okay, but here's the real thing. There's a guy at the movies that we want you to meet. And this is the 40s, so this was a big deal. You didn't swipe on Tinder. This shit, her dad didn't know she was going to meet a boy, so it was a little scary. And they get to the theater, and lo and behold, it's Ed, and they watch the movie, and then there's an air raid that happens. So all of them are bunkered down during the duration of this air raid, because this is before World War II. And after it was all said and done, Ed offered to take the girls out for a Coke. And Lorraine said, I don't like Coke. And order some kind of ice cream soda, which was like triple the price of a nickel Coke. But Ed ends up signing up for World War II and going and serving. And during that time, Lorraine is still at school. Lorraine, from a very young age, recalls being clairvoyant and being able to see lights around people's heads. She would later learn that this was reading auras, and she would also learn to develop her trace mediumship.
What is trace mediumship?
Trace mediumship, Amanda.
Shut up. Say
What?
Sound like a dictionary. Oh, she goes into a trance. Oh, okay. Doesn't like, even in those movies, she talks about going into a trance.
Yeah. Ed, however, did not have any psychic abilities. They have an interview in the 70s or 80s, I believe, where Ed is talking about how he's like the NYPD and she's like the medium. So it's like Dead Files before Dead Files was a show.
Oh, how cute is that?
Right, exactly. And
because he was a cop.
They were very much in love. I don't know what it was. I think Lorraine was always told, like, she couldn't... It was bad to have what was happening to her, like, to see auras and to be able to hear things, that it was terrible, it was bad. She went to a fucking Catholic school taught by nuns, and she said to a nun at one point, "Your lights are brighter than Mother Superior's." And never let on what happened after that, but in every interview where I've seen her talk about her past, she has said that that was something that changed her life. And then she met Ed.
Yeah. It's just perfect.
And when he came back from World War II, they got married and went about becoming America's demon hunters.
Yeah.
Basically.
Because I believe most things were demonic.
Yes, Ed himself was not a orthodox demonologist. He had no training.
Oh yeah, sure didn't, but
he
sure called himself one.
He trained himself, and he is the only self-trained demonologist that is recognized by the Vatican.
Hey.
They would provide us a complete list of case files. Over 3,000, I believe, different individual cases that they worked on all over America and even going overseas. The world. I mean, there are instances that we get, of course, with Amityville and Enfield. We also have the Perone House, which is what The Conjuring is based on. Annabelle. We have a werewolf story. They caught one of the men that was actually possessed by a demon that was making everyone think, or making him think he was a werewolf. They were very odd in how they would show up to these places.
Yeah.
Ed himself was a painter. He would show up to houses that were supposedly haunted or that he felt were haunted and paint them, and then deliver that painting to the resident of that home. And Lorraine is quoted as saying, "My husband likes to paint haunted houses." And that's kind of how they would get their foot in the door and begin investigating and helping people. Lorraine and Ed in the 1950s founded the Warren Occult Museum in their basement, which is where they bring back a whole bunch of these haunted or demonic items. Now, you might ask yourself, why do they have these? Is this like just the world's most satanic tchotchke collection? Like, what are we doing here? But Ed and Lorraine, along with their son-in-law, Tony Spira, who is the person currently running the New England Society for Paranormal Research, which was founded by Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Yeah.
And a bunch of other
in the
people.
50s, right?
In the 50s, right? I believe.
Yeah, 52?
I don't have that specific date.
Oh.
I believe you're right.
Yeah. I thought that society was very interesting because they get so many different individuals along the way.
Yes, but it also has like scientists and actual medical doctors, and it's
police officers.
It's got a whole range of different credible scholarly people. Like, if you're sitting back and you're like, oh, okay, just two people that were, like, self-proclaimed demon hunters. Okay, but, you know, PhD, doctorates, fucking police officers, civil servants.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more than just
skeptics and believers.
Hearsay. Exactly.
Skeptics and believers, like this society is very interesting. I love the way that they do kind of do their thing. It gives them more credibility, though they've done some stuff that you go back and forth with them.
Well, and that's the thing. History always has multiple sides to it. There might have been other things going on. I mean, I don't know how I'd feel if somebody knocked on my door and gave me a picture of my house and said, I like to paint haunted houses. I would be like, I'm framing this right now. Are you Ed Warren? Jesus Christ, get in here. We got a lot to talk about. If I was a normal person, I'd be like, what the fuck are you doing? Get out of here. Now I have a demon, I bet. What was I talking about? This museum is really freaky. I swear to God. I saw a couple of interviews where people went down for, like, special trips and took video of these things. You're not allowed to touch anything. Annabelle, which is actually, if you've seen any of the recent movies, a porcelain doll. She is not a porcelain doll. She's a huge Raggedy Ann doll.
I don't even know why they did that.
I think it's more terrifying as a Raggedy Ann doll, to be perfectly honest with you.
A ginormous one at that.
It's one of the biggest attractions there. They actually have Annabelle in this, like, wooden box that's got special blessings on it and bindings. Yes, special bindings to keep Annabelle's spirit within that box. It says do not touch, which not a fucking problem. And in the video I saw, they had the Devil Tarot card pinned to it, which is really freaky in and of itself.
Right.
There's actually a story that I saw in an interview years ago where there's this couple that showed up and wanted to look around at all of the Warren Occult Museum stuff. And he got up into the room, this man and his girlfriend, and he was staring at Annabelle in her box. And the museum curator, guide, father, minister dude was like, that's Annabelle. Please don't touch. You know, don't provoke her. Don't do any of this. And the man was like, what the fuck is this thing gonna do? Huh? Tap, tap, tap. Come out and get me. At that point, the curator was like, you gotta go. We don't allow that kind of shit to happen here. He was much nicer about it than what I just phrased, but he was like, no, you really have to go. And this man and his girlfriend got on their motorcycle and was driving out of town. And as they got a couple miles away, all of a sudden, the man, like, springs off the road into a tree. And he is killed instantly, and his girlfriend is rushed to the hospital. And, of course, I think everyone's called and informed, and they were like, what's going on? What's going on? And the woman was like, the last thing we saw before we crashed was a Raggedy Ann doll standing in the center of the highway.
Oh, no.
Annabelle came for them. This is the thing. Do not fuck with demons. I don't know how many times we have to say that.
Every time.
Every single time. Until the message is clear.
Receive. Do not fuck with demons.
But they've also got satanic idols that were found in the forest at Sandy Hook. There's death dolls, voodoo dolls of all sorts, pictures, haunted, just everything. One of the most interesting cases, and one of the largest cases, not only for the Warrens, but one of the largest cases in poltergeist activity in general, would be one Enfield Poltergeist case.
Oh my god. So much stuff happened in this case. It is probably the most well-documented case, haunting case, poltergeist case I've ever seen. Like, everything.
Absolutely.
They have everything except for film evidence. which I thought was crazy. And that's kind of a reason people think it's kind of not real.
Especially in that day and age. Like, they've got audio, they've got fucking pictures, they've got everything they need. Why?
Witnesses.
Why was there no actual footage?
And you know, 2 reasons they said. Guy Playfield, who was there, he said anytime they would set up their infrared camera to record at night, the lights would come on and it would bust out the camera.
Ooh, that's interesting. I also heard that when the cameras were on, nothing would ever happen.
Yes. And I also heard there's a photographer from the Daily Mail who was very involved in this. And he said he brought his camera and 2, I think he said flash boxes busted. So he wasn't able to, use them.
Weird.
2. And he said he had no idea how it happened. But for some reason, I don't know if those were picture cameras or if those were for, video cameras, because I don't know. It was the 70s. I don't know what they had.
Right.
I'm going to be honest. But whatever it was made it impossible for them to film. But he said if he had our technology, it would be a whole different story.
Well, I mean, yeah. Technology has come a long way.
Yes. But, this case. Oh, Lord. And I think this case is what Conjuring 2 is based off of.
It absolutely is.
And that baffles my mind.
It does too, because I watched some shit from Conjuring 2, and I was like...
Me too.
That's Enfield?
Right?
That doesn't sound like Enfield.
I've been watching stuff about Enfield all day, and I don't remember any of this happening.
All the crosses turned upside down? When? I feel like that'd be a picture that they would have.
Right. Oh,
And
okay.
Ed and Lorraine's involvement in the movie.
And this is crazy. It is insane.
Okay, so do you want to just start out with the story? Tell us what happened at Enfield, Amanda. Take us back to that spooky night of August 29th, 1977.
So, the Hagglesons actually lived in this house before any of this haunting stuff started happening. They had been living there for a while, actually. But, like Dakota said, in August 1977, they started reporting strange things happening. First, it started with Janet and her brother, Johnny. It was her brother. They both claimed that the beds were vibrating, but their mother didn't believe them that night, and then nothing else really happened. The next night is when it starts getting crazy. It said that the mother was downstairs when she had put the kids to bed when she heard a large commotion, and she ran up into her daughter's rooms and started yelling at them for being up so late. And they said that there was knocking on the walls, and the mother still didn't believe them, when suddenly the dresser drawer moved out from the wall. So then the mother pushed it back against the wall. Then it did it again. And then as she's trying to push it back, she has to use all of her strength to push it back against the wall. Then it did it again. And she said that time she could not push it back against the wall. She used all of her strength and it would not budge. At that moment, she gets terrified. At some point, she decides to go over to her neighbor.
Well, no. Don't forget. She tries to push it against the wall, and it doesn't go against the wall, and then it starts to move towards the door.
Oh,
it tries to shut them in there.
Yes.
Already bringing a threat to this situation.
Exactly. So then they end up running over to their neighbor Vic and Peggy's house, the Nottinghams. And she's telling Vic all this stuff, and they kept talking about how big Vic was. I guess he was they kept calling him a builder. So
like a big old beefy man.
Yeah, and they were like telling him everything, and he didn't believe them. So he goes back over to the house, and he says he was up in the girl's room when he started to hear the knocking. And he said that like I said before, he was a builder, so he knew about construction. He knew about like creaks in the house and stuff like that. He said no, this was knocking, and it was just coming from all over the house. I don't remember anything else happening when he was there.
Yeah, no, he was just trying to figure out why there was knocking on the wall and in the bedroom and on the ceiling, because none of that made any sense. And he was like, I was beginning to get a little frightened, and they made a big deal out of that because this big beefy man is like terrified of knocking.
Scared.
That's unexplainable.
So they end up calling the police to come over to the house. And they said while the police were there, they heard 3 loud knocks. So the police officers start checking, trying to see where the noises are coming from, trying to see if the kids are like pranking them, just trying to figure out where this knocking is coming from. When the son says, "Look at the chair," and it said that the chair starts shaking and then slides 3 to 4 feet across the room. And the police officer, the female police officer, tells the story, like corroborates everything. She says she saw it with her own eyes. Like this chair just scooted across the room.
She actually signed an affidavit that like went into legality, saying a large armchair moved unassisted 4 feet across the floor.
And then she said she checked for wires. She said she had no earthly idea how this happened. So, but the cops.
Yeah, no. What did they do, Amanda? What?
They couldn't do anything. They left.
Can you blame them? How do you?
No.
Like,
I mean, what do you?
I listened to a couple interviews and they were like, "What do you do? Like, you want to help,
Right?
but there's nothing in the house. There's just a whole bunch of knocking going on. I can't stop a person that doesn't exist."
Exactly. So what ends up happening is the Nottinghams call the press. They called the Daily Mirror and said, "Please, we need some help. There's all this activity at my neighbor's house. We're worried about them. We don't know what to do." So at first, the newspaper wanted nothing to do with this. They were like, they kept dodging them. They didn't want to do it. But the neighbors were so persistent, eventually they sent out a reporter and a photographer. And they say when they got there, nothing happened for hours. It was just silence. They walked around the house, nothing was going on. Their stories kind of differ at one point. One says they were about to leave and they were in the car when Vic comes and says, "Please come back in." The other one, the photographer, says that it was actually the family was brought over to the house. And that's when activity started. And there was marbles and Legos flying across the room. So the photographer is trying to take pictures of this because they're just like, this is crazy. And I also think they might have heard knocking. I can't remember. But at some point, one of the Legos hits the photographer square in the eye. And he said it was the corner and it left a welt on his eyes for a couple of days.
And weren't they like burning to the touch, like when you picked them up?
Yes, they were hot, the marbles. When you picked them up, they were hot.
Fucking weird.
And yeah, and they both of them could not explain what happened. One was very skeptical, but he always said he thought there was something there. He just didn't know what it was and he couldn't explain it. But after that, things get even crazier. So what happens is the Daily Mail, the pictures don't come out. You can't see anything just because it's marbles and Legos flying. Like, it's hard to capture. But they were really concerned for the family. So they actually reached out to the Society for, okay, we're going to call it SPR because, I can't read. The SPR decides to send out Maurice Grosse, who is actually an inventor. Like we said before, these kind of paranormal society, well, not necessarily paranormal, but this kind of society is always kind of different people who investigate paranormal phenomenons. So Grosse goes out there, and he had recently lost his daughter to a motorcycle accident, and her name actually was Janet. So from the beginning, he had a bit of a connection to the case, but he never let that mess with him. He always was out to try to prove his case, like what this was. He didn't let this get to him. So when he gets there, he records knocking, there's furniture flipping over. By the end of his stay there, he had recorded over 2,000 different incidences at this house. Pretty soon, he figured that it was a poltergeist.
We should define, what does poltergeist mean?
Isn't it like an active spirit?
Well,
I forgot.
the
I've
term
never done the
poltergeist is defined, like, logically as a noisy or mischievous spirit.
Yes.
Think Peeves in Harry Potter.
Exactly. And they say poltergeists are psychokinetic.
Right. This is where we start to get differentiating from what the origin of poltergeist means and moves into what ghost hunters now refer to mostly as poltergeist. Psychokinetic energy delivered from a host. It's not a ghost in and of itself. It's not a spirit. It's more of it's like a disembodied tulpa. A tulpa is a creature that you create and you believe it's real, and in your mind's eye you create it, thus it becomes real. It's like the imaginary friend that actually becomes real and can fuck shit up or do good things. It's not a ghost, but it is energy that is active and working with other things in the house.
Yeah. And normally a poltergeist will show up after a traumatic event.
Yes.
Normally to adolescents, normally to females,
which we had prime fucking here. Like,
all three here.
We've got 2 girls, both 12 and 11, and then 2 young boys,
Margaret and Janet.
10 and 7.
And their parents had gotten divorced.
Recently.
Yeah. Not too long ago, and they had no money. They were very, very poor. They were in a bad situation when all of a sudden this is going on. And a lot of the stuff that was going on was happening to Janet. Like, as time started going by, they started, like, levitating Janet. There's pictures of Janet being thrown out of bed. There's pictures of Janet going into violent rages and Gross having to hold her back. There's an insane picture. At one point, because this stuff was happening, by the way, poltergeist events normally happen for somewhere between weeks, months, and on very, very, very rare occasion, years. This whole haunting, or like poltergeist situation, happened 18 months.
Yeah. Which
is another thing that's so incredible about it. How well documented it was and how long it went on. So, like we said, there's so much knocking. They were having a hard time going to sleep. Janet started having these fits of, these, what they called trances, and then she would go into fits of rage. So at one point, they had a doctor come over and dose her up with 10 milligrams of Vicodin.
Nuh-uh.
I think they said.
Seriously?
Yes. It was something to make her go to sleep. It might have been Valium. I don't remember what they said. It should have been the V. Yes. They knocked her out. They said they were downstairs when all of a sudden they heard a loud commotion. When they got upstairs, Janet was on top of the dresser, passed out, head hanging off on top of the dresser. There's a picture of it. It's crazy. And the uncle found her like that. And they said there's no way, they have no idea how she did it. Her and her sister were being pulled out of bed. At one point, the whole family ended up sleeping in the same room, right? So, Gross is there, and they were standing there when suddenly someone notices that the fireplace is shaking. When suddenly the metal piece of the fireplace comes hurling out and goes over the bed that's in front of the fireplace, and it's only stopped because there's a pipe connected to the wall that it can't disconnect from.
No.
Yes. And he had, in one of the documentaries I saw, Gross had it, and he said, I can't pick this up. How do you expect an 11-year-old to pick it up?
Yeah. Well, and I think it's really important to think about how terrifying this knocking actually was. Like, it's not just knock, 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 knock. It has varying degrees of how loud it can be. It can fade in and out. It can move along walls. It's literally like something's playing this game with you.
Exactly. They said you would hear the knocks on one side of the wall, go over there to listen, then you would hear the knocks on the ceiling, and then you would hear it on the other side. It was just playing with them a lot. And actually, after that stuff with the fireplace, Gross knew he needed help. So he went to a SPR convention, and he asked if anyone could help him with the poltergeist case. This is when Guy Playfair joins the picture. He was actually a paranormal writer who dealt with the poltergeist once before in Brazil, so he knew what was going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, after that experience, he said he never wanted to deal with a poltergeist again, but he could see that Gross needed help, and he said, I'll come out, maybe stay for a week and help out. He said after that he ended up staying for 14 months. And he said what he experienced, he cannot just explain.
Well,
he ended up writing a book about it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. When Playfair gets introduced, that's when we start getting the disembodied voices.
Exactly.
Which is the really fucking terrifying part of this.
Yes. At first, they started trying to communicate with this poltergeist. So first it was with the knocking. There was a night, it's all recorded. Gross started kind of demanding that the poltergeist answer him. And at first he was saying 2 knocks for... 1 knock for no, 2 knocks for yes. And he asked questions. And it was actually responding to him. And then at one point he asked if it was going to leave. And he got like 1 knock. And then he asked if this was a game. When suddenly a cardboard box flew across the room and hit him in the face. And he's like, well,
I guess this is a game.
Right? Like, okay, well, I see where we're at. And then after that, he said, Gross and Playfair vividly remember one night they were there when they heard a dog barking in the house. And I think it was Gross said, which would have been fine if there was a dog there. But there was not, and I know these children could not make this sound. And then he's like, well, I'm going to try to communicate with it. So he asked it again to bark for him. He asked it to whistle. And then eventually he asked it to say his entire name. And you can hear a man's voice say his name. And
what's his name?
After that, Maurice.
Oh. Never mind. Unless you meant nothing.
Oh, not the Portuguese.
No, you haven't got to Bill Wilkins yet.
Yes, exactly. I was just about to
Sorry.
get to him. So, no, you're fine. After that, Janet starts speaking in this terrifying growl, and they actually... they have brought in reporters, they have brought in TV crews, which another reporter remembers seeing remember seeing furniture flipping over, hearing the knocking. They've brought in magicians, they've brought in other researchers, they've brought in all these people who, over 30 witnesses experienced something at this house. And there's this crazy interview where you can hear Janet in this poltergeist speaking, and it just doesn't seem like something an 11-year-old girl should be able to do. They went to a like, I forget what they call it, but he kind of tells you, like, knows about the throat and the voice and stuff, and they asked
ventriloquist.
Where, not the ventriloquist, it was like, they did bring in a ventriloquist, which was crazy to me, but they went to another person who diagnosed it with, like, she's not speaking from her trachea.
Oh, the false
she's
vocal
speaking.
cords.
Yes, which is it. I tried it, and I literally got hoarse within seconds. And this girl would be doing this for hours. though it's like in and out, but she could go back to her regular voice in a second. It was crazy. No, she didn't clear her throat. She never went hoarse. And she actually said that the voice wasn't actually coming from her. It was actually coming from behind her. And she felt like something, like on her neck, she could feel vibrating. And then that's when the voice would come out. And she would kind of go into this, like you would see her sometimes and her lips wouldn't be moving, but you could see like her throat moving. So they ended up bringing in a ventriloquist to check it out. They said gross, put water in her mouth and put tape over her mouth, and the voice still was able, like, still came out. And then they would take the tape off and she would spit the water back in the cup. And they're like, nobody could do that. Like, there's nobody on earth who could do that. So things were crazy. There was another time when Janet started, like we said, a lot of stuff focused around Janet. And when she started her period, actually, that day, crazy things happened. Gross told Janet, actually, pause on that. Before I go into that story, they actually had tested Janet after the fireplace incident to see if she could bend spoons, if she could, like, manipulate metal. And they said that when she did, like, when they had her do it, the spoon bent, and then, like, her readings were off the chart. And then after she started her period, she was able to teleport a cushion on top of the house, or the poltergeist, something did it. And a baker from across the street saw it with his own eyes. He said he saw a freaking orange cushion appear on the roof, and he didn't know where it came from. They also had a point where she, like, said she teleported into the neighbor's house, came back, described the bedroom to a T, which she should have never been in there, and she had left a book, and I think it was called Children's Fun and Games. And she said the neighbor was very, very, like, uncomfortable because she was not in the house, and when she came back, she found that book in her room. And they also have 2 eyewitness accounts of people who were on the street that saw Janet levitating horizontally around her room, just going in, like, giant circles. And Janet says she just remembers feeling cold hands holding her.
And this is where we get Ed and Lorraine introduced into this story. They actually come in 1978, in the summer of 1978. And there's 2 very different versions of this story. And there's Ed and Lorraine's version. Ed and Lorraine were, in fact, in Enfield. They did, in fact, show up to the house. And it was actually recalled by Guy Playfair. He said, yeah, they showed up. They showed up for one day, uninvited. Yep. And Ed apparently pulled him over to the side and said, hey, you stand to make a lot of money off of this thing. And that was when Playfair dismissed him, and the family, like, the Warrens were not as involved with this case as The Conjuring 2 might let you believe.
Right. Which kind of stinks because Gross was there from the beginning, like, literally the beginning. And the Warrens pretty much get all the credit for, like, getting rid of this thing.
That's absolutely true. But that plays to our sense of romanticism. I mean, you can't have the Perron case in Conjuring 1 with Ed and Lorraine, who actually did do something for their family, and then follow it up with Conjuring 2, and Ed and Lorraine aren't the main characters, or aren't even in it.
But they have over 3,000 cases. Why did you pick a different
That's
case?
actually legal reasons. Warner Brothers only has access to 10 cases because all other, like, the remaining cases are locked in with this, like, one small company that has the rights to the book, which has all the cases. Wow. So Warner Brothers can't do anything else. That's why there's 3 Annabelle movies.
Right.
But
It was, and like I said, I only watched a tiny, like, 19 minutes of footage from this movie, and I could tell that they had. What actually happened was terrifying in itself. Why did they have to make up so much stuff?
Exactly. But I will say there are actual tapes from Ed Warren that he says
Yes, I heard some
come
of
from
them.
Enfield, and they are scary.
Yeah, you can hear the growly voice, and Janet. They were kind of hard to understand.
Well, but
yeah,
Ed and Lorraine hit on something specifically in this case that was different. They talk about the atmosphere of the house, how the room feels. Like, people can come in and they can see levitations and watch things float around. They'll be like, "Oh my god, I'm so scared. That's fucking freaky," and I would be too. But these two walked in and said, "There's something not. No. There's something more going on here."
Yes, which the voice actually ends up revealing something kind of interesting. Bill Wilkins died in the house. And the voice one day recounts about talking about going blind and then dying in a chair downstairs.
Everything goes
from
black.
a hemorrhage.
From a hemorrhage.
Yeah. And comes to find out his son, I think his name was Terry, comes and confirms that's exactly
His father
how
died. Yeah.
Bill Wilkins. Yes. In his favorite chair in the living room from a hemorrhage. So, it was really, really interesting, but a lot of people actually think the voice is where it starts to become too much. I found it very interesting because Guy Playfair had dealt with a poltergeist before, and he says, poltergeists only have a few tricks. You know what I mean? They knock, then they start throwing around little objects. Then they start throwing around larger objects, and then furniture starts getting flipped over, and then people start getting thrown. And he was saying everything was happening here at Enfield, at all of it. It was like the poltergeist playbook was just happening. And after the voice started happening, people started thinking that the children were hoaxing everybody.
Yeah, no, that's the right word.
And the girls admitted it, that sometimes they would play little games to see if Playfair and Gross would figure it out, and they said they caught him every single time.
Yeah, I mean, even Janet would come back later in like 2015 and state that, oh no, it was like, I think it was 2012 or 2013, she would state if there was a percentage amount of the stuff that was faked to what was real, it would be 2% to 98. Meaning 98% of it actually happened. And that's what we've got to remember here.
Yeah.
Someone actually suffered. Yes, there is an interview when she's a child where they ask her about the haunting, and skeptics like to point to this one specifically and say, oh, well, see, that's an admission of guilt. They ask, do you feel haunted? And Janet's like, I don't really think of it as a haunting. And her sister turns to her and says, shut up. But what most people don't go back and think is, up until the voice, it wasn't really, like, the girls looked at it differently. Like, there was, of course, horrible things that happened, but they were also getting attention. And Janet, at one point, says that it's almost like it wants to be a part of the family.
Yeah. Which, they often say poltergeists go out seeking attention, or if someone's faking a poltergeist, they do it to seek attention.
This is true.
People started getting really concerned for the family, so they sent the family on a week vacation, and at the time the uncle was watching the house, and he said he went inside and he was going upstairs to get an alarm clock when the door to the bedroom opened enough so he could go in. He went in, the door closed behind him. He was like, I was freaking out. I think he said he heard some knocking. He grabbed the alarm clock. The door opened again, opened enough for him to go out, and closed behind him. And he said he ran out of the house. And later, he went back another day, and he saw a full body apparition there. And he said, at first he wanted to ask, what are you doing here? Like, why are you in my sister's house? But he knew where he was, and he said he blinked, it disappeared, and he hightailed it out of there.
As any sane person would do.
Exactly. Towards the end, things started to get really, really out of hand. So they decided to send Janet, because most of the stuff was happening to her. They decided to send her off to the hospital to get tested. And
for what?
To see if she was mentally unstable. Like, see if they were trying to see if she was hoaxing everybody. That word just sounds wrong to me. Yes, hoaxing everybody, or like what was going on. And soon after that, she comes back. I think it was Playfair said he got a call from a friend saying, I have a Dutch man who said he can get rid of this thing. Do you want me to call him up? And guy said, yes, please. And the Dutchman came. He said he was talking, having a conversation with the family, got to know them. Said, I will have this thing. He actually spoke no English. It was all through interpreters. But he said, I will get this thing out of your house within 20 minutes. And he went upstairs, and when he came back, they had no more activity. One of them said nothing, like it just stopped. One said they got a Denmark guy to come. But that's what Guy Playfair said in the interview, is that that's how it ended.
The major activity ended, but the family did end up moving out of that house.
I heard the mom stayed there until she died.
Yeah, no, I mean, they all moved out of that house, and then when
the kids
when the
all
mother
moved out,
died,
and they lived normal lives.
She said that they always felt like there was something still there watching.
Yeah.
Well, after Peggy Hodson died, Claire Bennett and her 4 children moved into the house. And in 2015, she was like, I didn't see anything, but I feel uncomfortable. There's definitely some kind of presence in this house. I've always felt like someone's looking at me. But it wasn't until her 15-year-old was affected by it. Apparently, he woke up and saw a man come into his room, and then he ran to his mom and said, hey, Mom, there's a man in my room. And his mom said, we're leaving.
Yeah. That would have been enough for me. Well, and the thing is, Bill Wilkins, like, that, his spirit would be there.
The poltergeist activity would be specifically derived from, they say it's from a young female who's starting her menstrual cycle. That's usually the stereotypical poltergeist victim. It's just because it's a lot of environmental change, it's a lot of emotional change, it's a big specific time, and certain people are sensitive and can have major effects with their psyche and psychokinetic energy. But
and Janet,
we have a situation here where psychokinetic energy is also manifesting alongside an intelligent haunting, because these voices identified themselves. Now, it could be that it was playing a joke, it could be this, it could be that, but with the people that have occupied that house since, it sounds like the intelligent part of this haunting is still residing in the house.
And it was interesting because I think when they were doing the voices, a lot of the big reason people didn't believe the voices when the voices started was because they were just saying crude things, childish things.
Yeah, they were like, no old man would talk about this.
Yeah. But then there was times it would be Bill Wilkins, and he, talk about how he died, and he said he came back because he wanted to see his family, but his family was gone. It's like, oh wait,
that makes sense. That? The hemorrhage, the knowing of his death,
and skeptics will blow it off and say, well, their neighbors could have told them. What neighbor? I mean, really? What neighbor tells an 11-year-old how a man died?
Hey, it's your good old buddy Vic. Just wanted to let you know that a old man died right there. Have a good night.
Exactly. Right. But I find it very interesting how skeptics will kind of blow it off, being like the kids hoaxed everybody. It was all just the kids playing games and tricking everyone. It's like, but how does a child pick up couches? How does a child, which is on? I mean, we have photographic evidence, we have eyewitnesses, but they'll be like, well, it's just hysteria. People want to believe.
Well, and that is a thing. They talk about the witnesses and the power of suggestion. If you go into something wanting to see something spooky, you're going to find something spooky. What I can't explain is the psycho torment of the family that the family says happened 100% to them. And these actual society members, ghost hunters, explainers, paranormal investigators, it's like a creed in paranormal investigation that you're seeking the truth.
Yeah.
The main goal is to disprove what is going on so that when you find proof and evidence, you have actual proof and evidence. So it wouldn't surprise me if the overstimulation got a mass amount of people to believe that certain things they saw but didn't see. But you're not going to disprove to me that what this 12-year-old and now mature adult says she experienced isn't real.
Yep. No one has ever changed their story. Actually, this whole event took a toll on Gross because people started thinking that he was a little too invested in the case. Like we said earlier, like the parents had gotten divorced. They said maybe the kids were trying to do more stuff to keep Gross around because he was kind of like a father figure, and he lost his own daughter. So it's kind of, they ended up doing a investigation, like the SPR did an investigation on Gross because they were thinking that he was a little too committed to the case. But by the end of the investigation, like, he was still in the society. He never got like kicked out or anything like that. They actually believed that there was proof of a paranormal experience at the place. So it still worked out, but they started questioning his motives and if this was actually happening or if the children were just making it up and tricking Gross into believing it. Oh, man.
It's really sad.
Seeing the pictures were crazy because the guy from the Daily Mail ended up setting a camera up that had like a trigger timer. So when he pushed a button, it would take like 5 pictures in a row. And he set up in the girl's room, and there's multiple pictures of Janet being thrown out of bed, being dragged, her and her sister Margaret being dragged out of bed, like I said, on top of the dresser.
And some of those have come under fire because they say that one of them, of her levitating, actually looks like she's jumping. The way her hair's falling, the way that the toes are pointed, the reaction, but to me, the look on this person's face is pure fucking terror, not happiness.
Right? Like something threw her out of her bed, and she said she would just be sleeping, and then suddenly she would find herself across the room on the floor. Like, how did I get here? She said she would just feel like cold hands. It's just, I think Janet might have definitely had a strength in her psychic kinetic whatever. And I think we also, like, they talk about Janet being very outgoing and kind of like a charismatic child, but her sister Margaret was super, super quiet. And as we've also learned from Harry Potter, it could be the quiet kid.
It could be.
Not Harry Potter, but the Fantastic Beasts. It might be the one you're not thinking of.
I think it's really important to kind of end this on Janet's words. In an interview with the Daily Mail here recently, she stated, "It was an extraordinary case. It's one of the most recognized cases of paranormal activity in the world. But for me, it was quite daunting. think it really left its mark. The activities, the newspaper attention, the different people in and out of the house. It wasn't a normal childhood. And let me just, go on the official record here and state, if you've not seen The Conjuring 2, I'm so sorry. That's what this story actually is. If you have seen The Conjuring 2, Valak has no part of this story.
I don't know. Yeah, it was interesting seeing how much they wanted to put,
It's because Ed and Lorraine are demonologists.
Right? To me, it didn't talk about the poltergeist aspect of it. I really want to write this movie. This actually, what
Girl, it's
actually
already
happened.
a TV show. It's on Netflix.
Crazy.
It's called The Enfield. It's Enfield.
Oh, is
yeah.
it? Because what makes me really sad is that, Gross was really, 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 really involved. And it's just, that movie just seemed to me like he pushed him right onto this. This was crazy. Reading, every video I watched, there was new accounts of something happening. What freaked me out the most is that levitating, those people who saw her from outside of the
hitting
window.
her fucking head across on the window.
Yeah, and they kept calling it a lollipop girl. I don't know what that is, but she's one of the ones who saw her, and she said she went home to see if she could do that. It was that was something you could do, and she said it was impossible. But what did you hear about a Ouija board?
I heard that the girls were playing with an abandoned Ouija board in the basement of the house before all of this paranormal activity got started. And Janet admitted to it. That they had been playing with one.
I just didn't watch that interview.
I think that's where Bill came from. I think that is literally, everything else is psychokinetic energy, and I think Janet and Margaret, or Johnny and Daniel, or fucking all of them together, were playing with the Ouija board, and I think whoever had the psychokinetic energy actually made a portal. Bill came out and was like, well, who are y'all? What are you doing in my house?
Where's my family? Yeah.
And so he was like, well, I guess I'll just be a part of this family.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
It is. But that, my dear friends, is Enfield. It is a long episode. Thank you all for making it through this episode with us. Join us next week as we discuss...
The sex demon.
Join us next week as we talk about the incubus and the succubi. You can find us on Facebook at Encounters a Paranormal Experience.
You can follow us on Instagram at Encounters a Paranormal.
Check us out on iTunes
and Spotify
and Google Play. And if you really, really love us, please leave us a review on iTunes, or even just a rating. Just slide that all the way to the 5-star, and you don't even have to leave a review.
Please.
If all of you do it, it'll help. Until next time, I'm Dakota.
I'm Amanda.
Stay spooky, y'all.
Bye.